So California had a single-payer healthcare bill that was supposed to be up for a vote, and there were a lot of great organizers on the ground doing incredibly hard work to get it to this point. And if you guys remember, last legislative session, there was a guy by the name of Anthony Rendon. Anthony Rendon? Something Rendon. I think it's Anthony, but I could be mistaken. And this guy basically single-handedly blocked single-payer coming to California because Democrats have a supermajority in California. Well, now we're thinking, hey, is this time going to be different? The organizers did incredibly hard work. It was able to get through, I think, the Senate in California. And then it comes up in the other body. And here I'm going to let Krystal Ball from Breaking Points go ahead and lay out what ended up happening.
California is effectively a one-party state. Democrats hold the governor's mansion. They hold 31 out of 40 state Senate seats, and they hold 56 out of 80 assembly seats. Whatever Democrats want in California, they can accomplish. And so it's with great interest that I've watched as many of those elected Democrats try to avoid doing something that they pretended to support, and which, by the way, their constituents overwhelmingly want. And that would be establishing a single-payer healthcare system in that state. So here is the very latest, and this news was breaking late last night. Unions, activists, and progressive politicians have been trying to pass single-payer healthcare for decades in California. The most recent attempt was back in 2017. That effort gained a lot of steam following Bernie's first presidential campaign. In fact, single-payer actually passed through the Senate in that state. But the health insurers, they had a key ally in Assembly Speaker Anthony Rendon. They flooded his campaign coffers along with the coffers of the Democratic Party writ large with millions in campaign cash. And lo and behold, Speaker Rendon decided to not even bring single payer to the floor for a vote. No one would have to take a tough vote to show whether they sided with the people or with the corrupt corporate insurers. And the issue was very effectively killed for that moment. But the fight wasn't over. Single-payer advocates got another shot with then-candidate Gavin Newsom, who backed the effort in his successful run for governor. Newsom recognized that the issue was popular with voters, and he was jockeying for the endorsement of an influential nurses union. So during that campaign, Newsom was totally unequivocal. He even chided other politicians for their fake support of universal health care. He tweeted, "I'm tired of politicians saying they support single-payer, but that it's too soon, too expensive, or someone else's problem." So here we are in 2022 after a pandemic that saw economic and health devastation, with California voters keenly interested in breaking away from this rapacious for-profit model that has had such devastating consequences for their state and for the country. And Newsom, well, he's no longer a candidate for office. He's governor. He's leader of the California Democratic Party. No one has more power over what that party backs and prioritizes and what ultimately happens in the state. So last week, a bill that would establish something called CalCare, single payer, passed out of committee, sending it for a vote to the full state assembly. Newsom must be ecstatic, right? Delighted that a key campaign promise is one step closer to fruition. Thrilled politically that he can deliver on a popular issue among California voters. Yeah, not so much. Whereas before, Newsom was tired of politicians making excuses for not backing single payer. Now he is one of those politicians making excuses for not backing single payer. When asked about this bill, he said, quote, "I've not had the opportunity to review that plan, and no one has presented it to me. I think that the ideal system is a single-payer system. I've been consistent with that for well over a decade. The difference here is when you're in a position of responsibility, you've got to apply, you've got to manifest the ideal. This is hard work. It's one thing to say, it's another to do." Indeed, it is one thing to say and another to do. I will give you that one. And I'll give you one guess what happened between campaign Newsom throwing down for single payer and Governor Newsom getting all weak-kneed. Well, he got a whole raft of cash. Our partners over at the Daily Poster had this report. Health insurer Blue Shield of California has been forking over multi-million-dollar donations to Newsom, to his pet causes, and to the California Democratic Party. We're talking $99,000 direct to Newsom's campaigns, $2.7 million to the California Dems. That includes a $1 million gift to the state party just last summer. That was back when Newsom was fighting back a recall effort. $100K to Newsom's inaugural, $20 million to a Newsom-backed homeless housing project. Now, this money has already reaped great rewards for this insurer. We previously covered here how Newsom awarded Blue Shield a $15 million no-bid contract for vaccine distribution, in spite of the fact they had absolutely no relevant expertise in setting up vaccination sites or in administering vaccines. But Blue Shield, they're not the only ones who've been funneling cash to Newsom and the Dems in hopes that they will kill single payer. Anthem, United Health, they also have ponied up significant contributions.
They literally just ran out the clock. They didn't even bring the bill up for a vote. They just ran out the clock, and then they'll shrug and be like, no, well, first of all, nobody's even going to ask them. The media's not even going to ask them, hey, what went down with that single-payer bill that was supposed to pass? The polls on it are overwhelming. It's like 86% of Democrats in California want it. I think 60% of the state wants it. They just ran out the clock. Didn't pass it. And Gavin Newsom was out there making direct affirmative arguments for Medicare for all. And then now when he actually has something he could do about it, he's like, Medicare for all? We don't know Medicare for all. What do y'all even mean Medicare for all? I don't even know what you're talking about. New phone, who dis? You look at this and you understand exactly why people are turned off by politics and politicians, and many people just check out. They just check out. And they have this general worldview of like, look, nobody's fighting for me. Nobody gives a fuck about me. So why should I even get involved in the system? Why should I partake? Why should I waste my time? If every single time that you fight and try to get something done and invest your own effort and your own money, not only do they not help you, they straight up stab you in the back and twist the knife. I mean, in some ways, it's even more odious than the Republicans here, because the Republicans are like, I don't want to do that policy, and they're upfront about it. The Democrats in California were like, yes, we're going to do this. We love this. We support this. And then they could have, and they didn't. And they didn't. And we know exactly how and why this happened. See, that's the part where I think some people lose the plot, where your general, more apolitical type observer looks at it and goes, I don't know, they're just bad people. It's not that they're just bad people. We have terrible incentives in the system. And as Krystal laid out there, great reporting from David Sirota, it was all because of the campaign contributions. Literally, the whole reason was the campaign contributions. That's the only reason why they did what they did. Which means that there's two possible answers that what you could do to fix this. Number one is you have to get the money out of the system. If you get the private money out of the system, then it's much more likely the politicians will represent the voters because their campaigns are funded by the voters. That's what a clean elections system is. That's what a publicly financed election system is. So that's one answer. Get the money out of the system. That's obviously difficult because the Supreme Court basically said it's a free speech right in order for billionaires and corporations to buy elections and politicians. Total garbage argument, but that's the interpretation that they're going with. But the other thing you could do, which, would make it a lot more, which is like a workaround from the corruption, is, I've talked about this 1,000 times, do a national direct ballot initiative approach. And in this case, California already has the direct ballot initiatives. It should just be, they should get to work on putting it on the ballot so that, in other words, the people will vote on whether or not to have a single payer system. And if the people vote on it, it is much more likely it's going to pass, because even though there will be a massive propaganda effort from the health insurance companies, we've seen like 80% of the time, roughly, when an issue is brought up for the people to vote directly on, regardless of what state it's in, people seem to go the right way. Sometimes the propaganda is too thick and there's too much lying, and it somehow the bad side ends up eking out a victory. But look, even Florida in the 2020 election, that state went to Donald Trump by a pretty sizable margin, but 60% of the voters still voted to raise the minimum wage. So what does that tell you? When you give people a direct issue to vote on, generally they do the right thing. So that's the answer here. The fight, I guess, is not to do it through the legislature. The fight is to do it through direct ballot initiative. But either way, look, it's totally unacceptable and it's grotesque, and these people deserve all the hate that they're about to get from their constituents. I mean, I don't know if you live in California. If you do live in California, I would call Newsom's office. I'd call whatever other politicians were involved in this at the state level, and I would ream them. And everybody should do all hands on deck, everything they can to kick these people out. So just so everybody understands, because this is a no-brainer. It's a no-brainer. The U.S. spends 17% of our GDP on healthcare, and we get worse outcomes than countries that spend about 11% of their GDP on healthcare. Think about that. We spend way more than any other country, and we get worse health outcomes, and we don't even cover everybody. There was a report recently, Medicare for All would have prevented 33% of COVID deaths in the United States, according to a report from Public Citizen. So one of the reasons why we had worse COVID deaths numbers than other developed countries is because of what's called uninsurance, people who don't have health insurance. So they don't end up going to get treatment. They sort of hold back because they're like, I don't know if I'll be able to afford the bill. And so they stay home, and some of those people died. So about 330,000 lives could have been saved if we had a Medicare for All system just during the pandemic, never mind the roughly 45,000 every normal year. 30 million Americans are uninsured. About 80 million Americans are underinsured. There was a study from The Lancet that found Americans owe $140 billion in medical bills, which means roughly 1 in 5 people in the U.S. have medical debt in collections. And that doesn't even include all the medical debt because a lot of the debt is not in collections yet. Probably a majority of it is not in collections yet. So we're drowning in medical debt. It's one of the top causes of bankruptcy. It might be the top cause of bankruptcy in this country. And we know Medicare for All would save $5 trillion over a 10-year period. $5 trillion. Why? Because you're getting rid of that mafia middleman. There's no purpose to the for-profit health insurance companies. None at all. That Commonwealth Fund study found we're ranked 11th out of 11 of healthcare systems in the developed world. Dead last in virtually every category. We're at the bottom. So we know, now I'm talking nationally here. This conversation is really about California, but nationally, I just gave you the statistics. We know this is the answer. Everybody knows this is the answer. The people want this. Why don't we get it? Simply put, because of the corruption. Because these politicians don't represent you, and ultimately they end up being brazen liars about what their platform is. And then you cannot look at that situation and then blame the people in any way, shape, or form. You cannot look at that situation and say the people are anything other than victims of a government that has stabbed them in the back repeatedly. It's pathetic. I said it before, I'll say it again. We know the answers. The answers are either to get the money out of the system so that they'll actually represent us, or do a work directly around the corruption and do direct ballot initiatives on these important issues. So for those, single payer advocates in California, thank you so much for your hard work. You guys are heroes. It's not your fault that this didn't get through. You ran up against a brick wall of corruption. Gavin Newsom is a piece of shit who deserves to be in prison for what he did here, as is every other politician. On the next go, do it through a direct ballot. Because that's how we got marijuana in a lot of states. That's how we got $15 minimum wage in a lot of states. That seems to be the only way in which we have positive change in the modern era, because the system is so immensely corrupt that popular will seems to have no effect on legislation if you go through the legislature. So it's the only way, man. And you could thank the Supreme Court for giving us this kind of a system too, by the way, because they're the ones who decided in a number of cases from the late 1970s until today. There's been 4 or 5 cases, whether it's McCutcheon or Citizens United or Buckley versus Vallejo or First National Bank of Boston versus Bilotti. There's a number of Supreme Court cases where they effectively ruled corruption is totally legal, bribery is totally legal. It is what it is. That's why we are where we are right now. So we know what the problem is. We know what the solutions are. We know how hard of an uphill fight it is. The most direct way to get the proper policy implemented here is through those direct ballot initiatives. But I have nothing but an unending... I got to watch myself here, not go too over the top. I have nothing but a burning, passionate hatred for every single Democrat here that lied and then stabbed the people of California in the back. Because this could have been a domino effect too. If you have a state as big as California that did implement a single-payer Medicare for All system, then that would have been something that led the way and let other states know this is possible. You can do this. And that would have helped end our healthcare nightmare in the country. It really would have. Because clearly at the federal level, it's an even harder task to pass Medicare for All. But if you start with one state and then you get another state that says, we're going to give it a go too, that could have been a domino effect. It could have been like marijuana, which is still, spreading through the states. I think it is coming, guys. It is coming. But the strategy needs to be right, and the strategy was through the direct ballot. So there you have it. Credit to Krystal Ball there for a wonderful breakdown. Just absolutely eviscerating the smug, slimy, sleazy, corrupt prick that is Gavin Newsom. Ever since Adpocalypse, when YouTube defunded all independent news and politics overnight, we haven't trusted them. We know they can pull the rug out from underneath us at any time. If you enjoy this content, please consider tipping $1 or $2 per month on the Secular Talk Patreon. Link in the video description box below. Thanks for your support.